Hello everyone, this is Showtime 112. We are back with the final chapter of Hermann Göring's story in World War I. As you may know, the infamous Nazi leader had a very successful career as a fighter ace in the Great War. Watch the first two videos if you missed them. When we last left on July 16, 1917, Göring was the commanding officer of Jagdstaffel, or Fighter Squadron 27. Even though he was credited with shooting down an SE-5A on that date, his trusty old Albatros D3 was damaged and written off after a forced landing. Göring's new mount was another Albatros, the D5. The performance improvement over the older model was marginal. The Allies were introducing improved models, but despite all this, it would turn out to be the most successful type on Göring's scoreboard. His first claim flying the D5 came on 27 July 1917, south of Passchendaele. The victim was supposedly a Martinsyde, but there are no British records to confirm such a loss. Göring was, however, credited with his 10th victory. His 11th victory is much more certain. On 5 August, his patrol attacked 9 Sopwith Camels, which at the time were quite new over the front lines. Göring managed to get on the tail of one camel and hit it from about 50 meters distance. Smoke started pouring out of the British fighter, and the pilot, Lieutenant Gilbert Budden, went into a spiral and disappeared in dense clouds. Lieutenant Budden of No. 70 Squadron was wounded, but made it back to British lines and then force landed. Göring's career was on the rise. On 18 August 1917, he was promoted to Oberleutnant, and 1 week later, he was credited with another confirmed victory, his 12th. Leading an evening patrol, he first attacked an Fe-2 two-seater aircraft. His guns soon jammed, so he broke off. However, he was able to unjam them. But at that point, he saw a lone Sopwith Camel at 4,200 meters south of Ypres. He chased the British fighter down to 1,800 meters, firing steadily. His opponent eventually fell and crashed in the haze. Göring's claim can be matched with the loss of a camel flown by a future ace, 2nd Lieutenant Orlando Bridgman, again from No. 70 Squadron, who was wounded but survived the encounter. Göring's 13th victory was an Airco DH-4 of 57 Squadron RFC, which he claimed on 3rd September. His claim of a Sopwith Camel on 20 September was not confirmed, but Göring was luckier the next day, 21 September 1917. Shortly after 9 a.m., Göring spotted 14 Bristol fighters on a bomb-dropping mission at about 4,500 meters. The German fighters attacked, and Göring placed himself below the tail of one Bristol and opened fire. The British airplane went down and crashed. Goering's victim was probably a 15 Victory ace, 2nd Lieutenant Ralph Curtis, and his observer Desmond Uniacke of No. 48 Squadron. Curtis died of his wounds, while Uniacke survived. The British airplane was certainly shot down, but other than Goering, another German pilot, Lieutenant Fritz Kiekhaefer, apparently received the full credit for the same airplane, showing the somewhat whimsical nature of victory recognition in the Great War. Goering had to wait a full month until his next victory. On October 21st at 3:45 p.m., he and 5 other pilots spotted 5 enemy fighters, which they identified as Sopwiths, attacking a German LVG recon plane. 3 of the British fighters were claimed, including one by Goering, just north of Lille. However, the German pilots misidentified their opponents, as the British planes were in fact SE-5s from 84 Squadron RFC. Goering's victim was likely the Australian pilot Arthur Hempel, who survived and was captured uninjured. Goering's last claim of 1917 occurred on 7 November. He was leading a flight of 9 Albatros fighters and claimed shooting down a DH-5, but British records show no losses. Goering was nevertheless credited with his 16th victory. The rest of November 1917 saw little combat due to poor weather, frustrating Goering's efforts to earn the famous Pour le Mérite decoration, also known as the Blue Max, which at the time required 20 aerial victories. He spent the rest of the year and the beginning of 1918 on a leave. Goering began scoring again in late February 1918. His 9-airplane flight was about 10 kilometers from their airfield at Marke, Belgium, on a morning patrol when they were attacked by 2 British SE-5s. The British pilots had the initial height advantage, but the fight soon dropped from 4,500 meters to 2,000. Goering estimated his opponents as very experienced pilots. His own airplane was riddled with bullets, but he avoided injury. After lots of hard maneuvers, Goering pulled a tight turn which placed him on the tail of one of the British fighters. Firing his machine gun, he shot the SE-5 down, killing its pilot, 2nd Lieutenant George Craig of 60 Squadron. The second SE-5 was brought down by Lieutenant Rudolf Klimke for his 6th victory. Once again, Goering embellished his report, calling Craig a captain with a reputation for audacity and daring, while in fact, Craig hadn't had a chance to distinguish himself. Health issues forced Goering to stop flying until 7th of March, but upon his return, his unit was relocated some 50 kilometers southeast to Erchan, France, as a part of spring offensive preparations. However, the Altstaffel saw little action initially. Goering had to wait until 7 April 1918 for his 18th victory. Jasta 27 received the famous Fokker DR-1 triplane. There weren't enough of them to equip the whole unit, so it continued to fly as a mixed Staffel, retaining some of its Albatros D5s. On 7 April, Goering and 9 other pilots attacked the British RE-8 reconnaissance 2-seater, escorted by fighters. The Germans were flying a mixture of Fokker triplanes and Albatros D5s. It is unclear which of the airplane types Göring was flying in this battle, but he certainly flew the Fokker in several missions, so this could have been one of them. Göring went after the RE-8, while most other Germans dealt with British fighters. Another German pilot, Lieutenant Stoltenhoff, also attacked the RE-8, and in fact claimed shooting it down. The victory was, however, credited to Göring as his 18th. Both pilots might have damaged the British two-seater, but Göring's seniority could have played a role. The British crew, 2nd Lieutenant Harry Collier and Lieutenant Eric Mossen, both survived. The triplane was an improvement for Jasta-27, even though it was tricky to fly and already not as good as the latest Allied types by the time it entered wide service. The trickiness was experienced by Göring himself, just one day after Manfred von Richthofen was famously killed in battle. Göring flew into a hangar, probably caught by crosswind. He escaped without injuries, but the airframe was no longer mentioned in reports, suggesting it was written off. Jasta-27 changed airfields again on 21st May, moving to Vivace. The period was, however, rather unsuccessful for the unit, which saw little combat. Göring nevertheless finally received his coveted Pour le Mérite on May 31st, despite being short of 20 victories. Sometime after this achievement, his unit was equipped with new Fokker D7 biplane, which proved to be much easier airplane to fly compared to the DR-1 triplane. It also offered higher top speed and good structural strength, enabling more aggressive diving and other maneuvers. The D7 was a match for any late-war Allied airplane. After changing airfields again on June 3rd to Mont-de-Soissons, Göring took off in his new Fokker D7 2 days later, followed by 4 other aircraft. At 10 AM, they spotted a French Doran AR-1 recon biplane, directing artillery fire and flying towards its own lines. Göring chased the French plane, expending about a quarter of his ammunition and eventually shooting it down. There are no records of an AR-1 being shot down on that date, but 5 relatively similar Breguet 14s were indeed lost. Göring may have misidentified his victim. Four days later, on 9 June 1918, Göring led a late morning patrol when he spotted a flight of French Spad S-7 fighters returning to their airfield at about 400 meters of altitude. Göring dove on one of them. he reported that the enemy fighter dropped like a stone and hit the ground at Horseshoe Wood, south of Corée. The French pilot Pierre Chon, however, survived the shootdown and was captured. This was confirmed as Göring's 20th victory. Göring's 21st aerial victory on 17 June 1918 had a bittersweet taste. At 8:30 a.m., his flight of 7 aircraft came across 5 Spads, attacking some German tethered balloons. The Fokker pilots dove and initiated a dogfight in which Göring was able to down a Spad 13 at about 500 meters of altitude. Another Spad was downed by Rudolf Kimke. 2 French pilots, Marshal Franceschi and Adjutant Breton, survived and were captured, confirming the German claims. However, 2 of the German pilots, Maximilian von Förster and Wilhelm Schäfer, collided while trying to attack a single Spad. Both airplanes crashed, killing their pilots. Göring attended the second Typenprüfung, or first aircraft type tests, at Adlershof beginning on 3 July 1918. This event was originally initiated by Manfred von Richthofen with the purpose of having new aircraft types tested by successful fighter pilots who could then use their influence over purchasing decisions. One of the new designs was Zeppelin Lindau D1, an all-metal cantilever fighter with Duralumin stress skin over wings and fuselage. Göring tested the new fighter, giving it a very positive opinion. He was followed by Hauptmann Wilhelm Reinhard, Richthofen's chosen successor as commander of Jagdgeschwader 1. During a dive, top wing and fuselage broke, the aircraft crashed, and Reinhard was killed. This opened the spot for a new commander, and the replacement was chosen in 5 days. It turned out to be Hermann Göring. He surpassed several other Staffel commanders with more aerial victories. Politics played a major role as the Crown Prince Wilhelm proposed Göring, but there is no doubt that he called in another favor from his influential godfather, Dr. Hermann Eppenstein, a rich physician of Jewish descent. Commanding the Jagdgeschwader originally led by the Red Baron was certainly a great honor, but apparently didn't do too much for Göring's overall victory score. In fact, he added just a single victory after his appointment. On 18 June 1918, Göring reported fighting a flight of French Spad 13s near Saint-Bandry at 8:15 a.m. He claimed shooting one down, while 2 more Spads were claimed by other German pilots. Sadly, the report lacks any detail, and while possible, it can't be matched to a specific French loss. This was Göring's 22nd confirmed aerial victory and also the last one. While a very respectable score, it doesn't even put him in the top 50 list of the German World War I aces. Had it not been for his role in World War II, few people would know his name today. Göring didn't fly very much in the last 3 months of the war, but commanding Richthofen's Geschwader was without any doubt a great honor for him. However, after his takeover, the situation began to deteriorate for the Germans, and losses began to mount, as the Allies were able to field ever-increasing number of latest aircraft types, which Germany wasn't able to match. In fact, by August 1918, Jagdgeschwader 1 was condensed to a single Staffel. How many of Göring's 22 claims are certain, or at least highly probable? The answer is 18 or 19, which seems comparable to most other pilots' records. As mentioned earlier, the purpose of this series is not to glorify him or any totalitarian ideology, but simply to give an additional perspective to history. I hope you liked the series. Let us know if you'd like to see more World War I videos, and feel free to suggest specific topics. And as always, keep watching Showtime 112.